Kentucky basketball did something that I didn't think they were going to be able to do this season. Go on the road and win a game through their defense.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, writer for Sports Illustrated for various SEC-related things. But on this podcast, we take a dive into all things Kentucky athletics. On today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to be recapping Kentucky basketball's 63-57 win over the Arkansas Razorbacks after what was a very tumultuous first half. The Wildcats were able to pick up the pace and get things done down the stretch. Going to talk a little bit about how the defense carried the day here for UK. Thank you so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. I want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available on all platforms. If you're watching over on YouTube, please subscribe to the show. And if you're listening on podcast, I would greatly appreciate it if you subbed there as well. So let's go ahead and get into it. Again, 63-57 was the final score here. Wildcats started this one off very, very cold from the field, only scored 4 points in the first 25% of this game. And it was a lot of the things that we've talked about before, you and I, on this podcast, when it comes to the way that Kentucky runs their offense and their shot selection. When Kentucky goes on the road and they struggle in these big game environments, you will see opposing teams speed them up past their comfort level on the offensive end of the floor, which is difficult to do with this team, and force them into some confusing shot selection. You saw a lot of different things from Kentucky at different moments in this game where you're just like, okay, I don't understand why you're continuing to try and pound the ball inside on these drives to the basket where Arkansas just continues to pick up blocks, Makhi Mitchell is specifically there. I don't understand why we're settling for these different type of mid-range chuck-ups during transition where you could drive the ball to the basket, or you could look for something outside. I didn't understand sometimes some of the transition outside shots that the Wildcats selected in this one. Still ended up shooting a pretty good clip from beyond the arc, might I add. But yeah, Kentucky found themselves early in this game being sped up past their comfort level. And Arkansas, inefficient throughout the entire day, was never able to truly capitalize on it. I mean, they got up big early in this contest, but the moment that Antonio Reeves and Kentucky settled into this one, Arkansas never just really showed that punch, that ability to make it a double-digit game, to kind of push it past comfort level for the Wildcats. And so slowly but surely, you saw UK kind of work their way back into it. Like I mentioned, Antonio Reeves, the big catalyst in this one, 24 points, 4 of 8 from downtown. He was the guy last time the Wildcats faced off against the Hogs that went off. Was huge for Kentucky to get that win on the road last year to help with their NCAA tournament resume. But Sheppard is the guy I want to highlight here now that we've kind of gotten past, okay, Kentucky settled in offensively. They were not strong from the floor for the entire day, really struggled to get things going at the rim against Arkansas's physicality, which I just did not expect from this team. Sheppard did a lot of things for the Wildcats very well, had the second best offensive rating of the day, had 14 points, made 2 3-pointers, one of them huge there towards the end of the game, also had 4 rebounds, 5 assists, and 1 block, also 4 steals on the day. Sheppard continuing to show off the bench that he can be a very, very valuable piece for a lot of different reasons. Somebody else that I want to highlight here, Trey Mitchell, shooting 3 of 6 from beyond the arc, but 0 of 4 from inside the arc, finished with those 10 points, 10 rebounds. Really important for Kentucky during stretches of this game where Kentucky needed to grab some defensive rebounds. They needed to crash the glass. He was able to get things done against Makhi Mitchell, against the different players down low for Arkansas. I was impressed with his performance despite not being the best offensively. So Reeves, Sheppard, and Trey Mitchell, the 3 guys I kind of want to highlight here. Interesting note, Rob Dillingham did not play in this game, had a stomach virus before this one. Justin Edwards played a little bit in this one, but he was relatively ineffective as he is dealing with currently a knee injury, according to various reports. Kentucky not at full strength in this one, and I think I think, had it not been for that really sluggish start, had it not been for Kentucky's kind of grinding it out on offense to begin this game, first 10 minutes or so of play, Kentucky probably would have run away with this one. I mean, it was clear there towards the end, okay, Kentucky's the better team. They're able to hold on the road. They're able to hold a 2 to 3 point advantage for most of it. Anytime Arkansas came back, Kentucky was able to answer. And you know how I've continued to say on this show that the things that frustrate me in Kentucky losses are the 1 or 2 threes toward the end of the game that the opposing team makes, where it just breaks your back, and they've not been hitting them the entire game, but it's just at the last moment they're able to capitalize on it. Kentucky was the one that did that. Antonio Reeves, again, Sheppard, hitting a couple of big-time buckets to close this one out. Kentucky at one point up by 9 as this thing wrapped up, ended up winning the game by 7. Proud of the way the Wildcats fought in this one. Again, Arkansas, not one of the better teams in the SEC. We saw that from their offense, but it was a very difficult environment for the Wildcats, and they were able to come out with a victory. A couple different points I want to hit here in just a second about this matchup. The defense, the officiating, Arkansas on the foul line is another one that I want to hop into. Before I dive into that, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at FanDuel. Happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing down some super awesome bets. FanDuel has so many ways for you to end your season with a W, or 2 or 3 if you want to take it there. Not only can you bet on who will win the Super Bowl 58, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score touchdowns, how many points will be scored, and so much more on top of that. New customers join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. Again, that is FanDuel.com/lockedon. You can make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, continuing along here on the Sunday edition of Locked On Kentucky, recapping Arkansas's loss at home to the Kentucky Wildcats. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. Really important, by the way. Let's talk about this for just a second. Really important that Kentucky picked this one up for a couple of different reasons. I want to discuss this before we get into defense. They were able to kind of hold off the slippery slope that could have been, right? After losing to South Carolina, really frustrating game, got blown out in this one, could have come into this environment and really struggled. Kentucky was able to hold off. And on top of that, they were able to kind of solidify themselves further in the SEC standings. Right now, the Wildcats sit at 5-2, as do the Auburn Tigers and South Carolina Gamecocks. Tennessee, at 5-1. Alabama at 6-1 in first place in the SEC. We talked about it. Crimson Tide, not a bad team, despite struggling in non-con play. Very difficult schedule that they had there. Kentucky, though, 15-4, 5-2. Curious to see if they fall significantly in the AP poll this week. I doubt they do, because of the fact that there were a few other teams that also struggled / lost as well. But Kentucky able to hold on and kind of put off what could have been a very slippery slope, losing momentum. Let's talk a little bit here about the defense, though. So we've discussed the Wildcats defense, how bad it's been, how much they've struggled on that end of the floor, and we came into this game and identified the fact that neither of these two teams have held an opponent underneath 76, I think, since mid-December for both of these teams. And I said this game might go into the 90s, and it did not. It did not go into the 90s. The winning team scored 63 points, which is shocking considering how good offensively Kentucky's been and how consistent they've been with giving up points to the opposition. So I figured in this game you would see a lot of running up and down the court. You would see a lot of scoring. But at the end of the day, I thought Arkansas's poor shot selection would be what did them in. And they did have poor shot selection throughout this game. I think more than I would have expected, especially from deep. And they were really inefficient. But also, Kentucky, I think, stepped up on defense in some ways. Now, does this mean Kentucky is going to immediately bounce back here and play the next few games against Florida, Tennessee, Vanderbilt, Gonzaga, and they're going to have some really good defensive stretches? I don't think so. But this is definitely a step in the right direction if it's going to start to trend that way. Kentucky went from, I think, 98th in adjusted defensive efficiency, jumped all the way to 70th in that category. Hey, you need to be inside the top, 57, I think, to have a legitimate shot at the Final Four, according to historical trends with KenPom. And so if Kentucky continues to climb here, you could see them in position to not just realistically make a run at the Final Four because of how good their offense is, but also realistically because they would fit the category of teams that have done this in the past 25 years or so. So Kentucky leaning on their defense a little bit here after getting down early. You can also credit some of that to Arkansas's bad shot selection and also their inability to get to the foul line. I thought Arkansas was going to be able to do a much better job getting to the charity stripe in this contest. They were not able to do that. Mekhi Mitchell was 8 of 10 from the foul line, but outside of that, only 3 other Hogs took free throws. They were 13 of 18 total. Kentucky only had 12 free throws in this game. I think the officiating in this one was it was poor at different points. I'll say that there was a block that Reeves Sheppard had where it was about as clean of a block as you could possibly see, but it was a foul that was anticipated to happen. Just not great officiating. But Kentucky fought through it. They were able to kind of bounce back here, get a big win, maybe start to build some momentum of their own. Who knows? You can always see things like this happen after picking up a really clutch road win in the SEC. You got Florida at home on Wednesday. That's going to be a big test. How will the Wildcats fare in that one? We'll talk about it as the week progresses. I think that's going to do it for today's short recap here on Locked On Kentucky. Hey, you can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. You can follow me on Twitter at @LanceDawe_, and you can follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, leave those in the YouTube comments below. Hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for the Monday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Have a great rest of your day, everybody, and God bless.